Folks, what's going on in education is much more than just reform. We're seeing massive changes coming through. In 2019, the UN met in Beijing and came up with the Artificial Intelligence in Education program, where they said they're going to use AI to change the values and beliefs of children. And unfortunately, this agenda is proceeding along in the United States, including even under conservative and Republican political leaders at the state level and in some cases even at the federal level. We've got a very special guest today for today's special issue of Behind the Deep State. It's a man who studied this in great depth. His name is John Klyczek. He's got a master's in English. He's taught college rhetoric and research argumentation for over a decade. His literary scholarship concentrates on the history of the global eugenics movement and also on Aldous Huxley's dystopic novel, Brave New World. He's got a very good book that I have a copy of. We've actually interviewed him on this before. It's called School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. And he worked very closely with our late friend Charlotte Iserby, and there's just a wonderful lady who we interviewed many times. He's also a contributor to Unlimited Hangout, an excellent resource for those looking for the real story on some of what's going on with the technology and all the rest of it. He's a contributor to New Politics, the Center for Research on Globalization, the Activist Post, and a lot of other publications. He's also got a black belt in Taekwondo, classical Taekwondo, and he's a certified kickboxing instructor. John, welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining us. You've got a new article out at Unlimited Hangout that's very interesting. It's on school choice, corporatization, social impact finance, and the dismantling of the Department of Education. There's a lot to unpack in here, but I want to start with the corporatization of education that you focus on in your book and how school choice actually plays into that. Because I think a lot of conservatives right now, they think of school choice as the exit route from the government schools. They think this is going to create a free market in education and all the rest of it. And they don't realize that, you know, Bill Gates and UNESCO and a lot of these very nefarious individuals that they would never trust are actually promoting this behind the scenes. Talk to us about how this all fits together.
Yeah, so the corporatization element sort of comes in through the school choice movement. So the school choice movement more broadly is basically just a basket of different public-private partnerships. The beginning of this movement was the charter school movement, so they're private companies that take public tax dollars and are subsidized as such. This time around, the school choice push is really more towards some of the alternative funding mechanisms. So basically what are known as education savings accounts, tax credits for tuitions and scholarships, and also voucher programs. And this is basically where we just fund public tax dollars, not necessarily into a charter school, but it could. It could be a public school, but really the goal here is to funnel some of that money into private schools, could be parochial schools, could be religious schools, could be home schools, which would bring with it federal government strings attached. But the corporatization element of the ESAs, the education savings accounts, if you look at some of the stipulations that were put forth in the Project 2025 document that basically lays out the school choice programs that Linda McMahon has essentially said she's going to pursue during her confirmation hearing, you'll see that what is detailed is the ESAs should be used to pay for, quote, curricular materials, quote, education therapies, quote, personal tutors. Some of these could be, if it's curricular materials, maybe it's a textbook. If it's education therapy, maybe it's a speech therapist. If it's a personal tutor, maybe it's a human tutor. But it could be ed tech corporations selling cognitive behavioral adaptive learning courseware that would fall under curricular materials. Education therapies could be biofeedback wearables such as the HeartMath EKG reader that's used for helping students with test anxiety, or it could be an EEG monitor, such as the NeuroCore product that was once upon a time financed by Betsy DeVos, which basically it's a brainwave reader that helps students manage ADHD. And then personal tutors, well, those could be GPT AI, such as Conmigo at Khan Academy being financed by Elon Musk. Some of the cognitive behavioral adaptive learning courseware products, such as Clever and Newton, being financed by Peter Thiel. So some of the broligarch tech bros behind the Trump administration are in bed with a lot of these ed tech companies that could be subsidized by these ESAs. There's also on the other end the ECCA, the Educating Children for Choice Act, which is another move for school choice provisions. This would be a tax credit scholarship program, so individuals and private companies can get tax credits for donating to these scholarship granting nonprofit corporations, and then those will funnel out those dollars. Many of them of which funnel their monies according to what are called impact investments, pay for success in particular, pay for success. Impact investments are provided for in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Basically, the way these work is a company, private entity puts up money up front to achieve certain outcomes. In this case, most of the education scholarship granting organizations would be geared towards workforce training, career pathways, development outcomes. They put that money up front. If they meet those outcomes, they will be subsidized that much. If they exceed them, they could make a profit. Some of these scholarship granting organizations actually focus on some of basically ESG metrics, specifically the S part of the ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So the social part being essentially DEI stuff. So one scholarship granting organization that comes to mind would be the Point Foundation, which focuses on improving educational outcomes for LGBTQBIPOC organizations. If you think that all the DEI stuff is going to go away under the Trump administration, just remember that there's ESSA provisions that allow for that were not rescinded by the executive orders. And then even if it's not going to emphasize the woke sociocultural outcomes, there are several think tanks that are behind the Project 2025 article or document, basically all coming out of the Koch-funded state policy network. Some of these include the American Enterprise Institute, EdChoice, formerly known as the Milton Friedman and Rose Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice, also the Heritage Foundation, Charles Koch Foundation. All of them financed social impact investments, whether social impact bonds, human capital investment bonds, pay for success contracts, etc. So these are the ways that the school choice ESAs and tax credit scholarship programs will essentially funnel money into edtech corporations and other corporate angles.
There's a lot there to digest. I think people will have to go back and rewatch that in slow motion and chase down a lot of those leads, because that's a lot of information right there that I think is going to be new to even a lot of the people that are deeply involved in this. Because I'll tell you what, John, the vast majority of the people who I know who are pushing this kind of stuff don't have any clue about any of the stuff you're talking about. They're just looking at this as a way to get kids out of public schools, maybe help promote Christian education, not realizing that, of course, there's going to be massive strings attached and that there are very, very powerful players behind the scenes promoting this stuff. Betsy DeVos famously said, and I've got the clip of her saying it, that by the time this is all done, we're going to have to think of all education as public education, because all education is of benefit to the public. Where does this end if it's not stopped? I mean, what does the education world look like in 5 years, in 10 years, if this continues moving along?
Well, I think it'll be the perfect merger, the perfect synthesis of what we might call the left-wing community schooling model combined with the right-wing school choice model. And so what that means is the majority of the student learning will be conducted largely through online devices, so essentially through homeschooling, and then most of anything that requires maybe a lab or some hands-on activity.
Well, not homeschooling in the traditional sense, John, right? Not like a mom and a dad or a mom or dad teaching their children. We're talking about they're doing school at home on a device, right?
Yes, correct. So this is why homeschoolers out there, you want to, you don't want to take the government dollars because what that's going to come with is provisions for regulating what is done in the home. So some of the monies that you can get for some of the ESAs could be used for homeschooling. It could be used for any of the devices or technologies that I listed. But obviously with that comes the data mining from those companies and also the federal strings attached. So one of the state laws that the federal ESAs that are being pitched are based on is the Alabama State Choose Act. And in this one, basically what they stipulate is that if you take the money, you'll have to comply with all of the regulations that are stipulated, including health code provisions, right? So if you're a lot of people that are moving to homeschool, a lot of those people are doing that because of the way things went with lockdowns and the forcible therapies, experimental therapies. So just know that, right, you're going to the homeschool as sort of an escape hatch. If you take that money, basically you're taking the government and all of that in with you. So that will be the outcome. But in the end game, it'll be what they call the community charter schooling model. So it'll be a community school where you will go to get the wraparound services, whether for workforce training, whether for health care, could be to intervene with students that are at risk, mental health, etc. Right, but a bulk of what you're anything that can be facilitated without the use of a brick and mortar building will slowly be streamlined through basically these ESAs and funneling ed tech devices into government-funded homeschool.
Yeah. It's really, really, really troubling. Now, I want to kind of move to a different topic that's directly related to this, and I think the Fourth Industrial Revolution is what connects them. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, we've done a lot of work on that right here on this program. It's this vision of everything being digitized, the merger, as Klaus Schwab defines the Fourth Industrial Revolution in one sentence, the fusion of our digital, our biological, our physical identities. And of course, that's a big part of what's happening on the education level, where everything is kind of moving online, everything is being digitized, everything being controlled. And then that connects directly to the transhumanist movement. I learned a lot from some of your recent articles about Barbara Marx Hubbard. I was aware of her. I knew she was a really significant weirdo that was pretty influential, but I didn't realize just how crazy all this stuff was, and her views on the need to eliminate large segments of the human population. John, I wonder if you could tie all this together for us. Give us your understanding of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, how that connects with transhumanism, and the role that this Barbara Marx Hubbard, very influential woman, played in laying the groundwork for the emergence of all this. And ultimately, what is the big goal? What's the big agenda?
Yeah, so I guess one way that I could thread everything together would be that sort of the operating system for the Fourth Industrial Revolution will ultimately be a social credit system in which all of your biopsychosocial data is tracked and traced to permit or rescind your access to the public square and commercial services, everything from healthcare to jobs, education, housing, transportation, etc. And so in the ed tech realm, basically these ESAs will be bankrolling, subsidizing the devices, the technologies that will be data mining some of those cognitive, behavioral, and social emotional algorithms that will be used to determine your social credit score. And actually, the heart math wearable that I mentioned, which is actually used at one of the schools where I teach, it's at the Wellness Center. I guess if you have some test anxiety, you can go there and they will walk you through the trademarked breathing technique with this wearable, and you gives you either like a binaural beat or something to breathe in rhythm with, and then it's going to measure your heart rates, and once you get there, you're supposed to be able to basically get your anxiety down for the test. So this thing is used in education. It's also used in sort of like board meetings for companies to help create basically what they call heart coherence, so that everybody's kind of on the same effective wavelength before we go to deliberate on what might be the new board policies. But it's also like used in like global new age meditations, and it's promoted by Barbara Marx Hubbard. So Barbara Marx Hubbard was an influential futurist new ager, basically promoted the neo-theosophical concept of conscious evolution, borrowing from a guy by the name of Teilhard de Chardin. It's this idea that the universe was created out of this basically this what they call the nous, right? Anaxagoras, the pre-Socratic philosopher, said essentially that the universe was consisted of nous, or mind, and that mind, that consciousness of the universe comes to know itself in the human mind. It is then expressed in technologies as the apex of human consciousness. And then the transhumanist part comes in, where we then merge with those devices, those technologies, to further augment and enhance our consciousness, ultimately leading to like sort of a collective conscious, sort of what they call the global brain in the New Age futurist movement. And part of that would be this heart math sort of cybernetic infrastructure. So if you go to heart math, well, there's two websites. There's HeartMath.org and there's HeartMath Inc. HeartMath.org is the nonprofit institution. Several of the people on the board there are very close with Hubbard, some of her colleagues, but they have in there a global coherence initiative where everybody will get together and put these wearables on and do a meditation focusing on a particular social or global event. There was one in which it was getting right towards the end of where they were curtailing or rolling back the lockdowns, and they said something like, "Now I know everybody's anxious to get out there and move around, but you might still be spreading the bug, so don't do that yet. We all need to sit together and meditate that we're gonna have the peace of mind and the inner balance to hold off for just a little bit." And so you put this thing on and you all log in, and on the screen it actually has like a graphical model of a globe with all these little points of light indicating who has their wearable on and what sort of heart coherence they are achieving, and with some focused intention in terms of the meditation on some sort of socio-political global outcome.
It's absolutely insane. And yet there are people who very passionately believe this and believe that people who stand against it are a problem that needs to be dealt with, if not eliminated. And one of the things that I learned about this individual through your writings was her view and some of the views of her colleagues that there's a big segment of humanity that is kind of like an obstacle to this glorious utopian global brain consciousness future. And talk to us a little bit about that. What about those who resist, those who don't want to participate in this directed evolution emergence of global consciousness?
Yeah, so what kind of got me started on the piece, honestly, was I just kind of wanted to take a break from writing about education. So I asked Whitney if there was any topics that she'd be interested in having covered. Turned out to be a 3-year project. Part of what she sent me as far as the profile piece was concerned was this infamous quote, something to the effect of "the riders of the pale horse will cull a fourth of the population who are not able to consciously evolve." This was an unpublished manuscript that was floating around the internet, often misattributed as part of the Book of Co-Creation. It's not in the published version, but it is actually, there's an unpublished manuscript that she used to give out at various conferences and workshops, etc. And long story short was I was able to track that down to Constance Cumby, who wrote The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. It's all about the New Age movement, sort of almost the seminal work, certainly one of the most pivotal and most important works on the New Age movement. And I was able to track down that manuscript at her house. She had a few copies of them, actually, because Hubbard had promised her that she would stop handing them out, and so I guess she had popped up here and there just to see, and she'd found that no, she was still selling them, still distributing them. So yeah, it says in there that those who will not consciously evolve, those people will be culled. It doesn't say how. But that is sort of the game plan that she has laid out. Now, I guess that must have been a little too much when the publishers looked at it and said, "No, we can't. Don't leave that in there." Or she just knew that someone like Constance was already beating the drum about it. So, but that was part of what took me so long with that article was tracking it down.
It's just amazing. And I go to these UN conferences and I see these people very openly talking about the population problem, that there's too many of us, and the question is always, well, who needs to go, right? I mean, you could always volunteer, I mean, right? But it's never them. It's always somebody else. Typically those terrible people who don't agree with this global agenda. We've got less than 10 minutes left, John, and we've explored a lot of really heavy stuff. I want to ask your thoughts on where this is going. I mean, do you see imminent success by these people with their weird agendas? How much longer do we have? And maybe more importantly, what should we be doing as just regular people who don't agree with this crazy vision they have for humanity?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, anything you can do without government strings attached, anything you can be self-sufficient on, as far as homeschooling in particular, right? That's the first place, I think, is to opt out of a lot of these systems, right? It's to create essentially parallel structures. So, as far as the education realm goes, that means, again, right, creating some pods, some co-ops, finding some like-minded parents in your neighborhood, in your community, getting together and homeschooling from there. as far as, just the technocracy goes, I mean, anytime you can not plug yourself into one of these devices, anytime you can do something that's analog, anytime, you can do breathing techniques to calm yourself down without a wearable, if you didn't know that, right? Like, now,
Wow, really?
So I mean, some of these things are pretty simple. It's just, are you willing to go the road less traveled, right? Are you willing to maybe be not so accommodated all the time with, right, instant gratification, the ESA dollars, right? The shortcut to alleviating your anxiety, whatever is the issue. But that's the main thing. And I would say we need to be we need to don't be too hopeful about this administration. I know that's not the popular thing to say right now, but hold them to the same scrutiny you would have held the left. And I think that's very important at this juncture.
Yeah, and I think that's always important for people, not to get so locked up into the team mindset and just evaluate policies and individuals on their merits rather than just, hey, it's our team and we should just be rah, rah, rah regardless. On that subject, what have you thought so far? I mean, about what the Trump administration is doing? Obviously, a lot of things that we didn't know or that most of us didn't know are starting to come to light. We're seeing some of the really bad stuff shut down. Of course, I have some concerns, and I've shared them right here on this program about a variety of different things, including some of what we discussed earlier with the education sphere. But what are your overall thoughts on what we're seeing so far?
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, are kind of consolation prizes, if you ask me. So I think right now, people were driven so crazy over the last 8 years, but certainly the last 4, right? That anything that is getting rid of or away from DEI, critical race theory, gender ideology, anything that falls under the woke umbrella, anything that's not that is like respite, right? Everything that's not that feels like
two
a win.
genders. Wow. Right.
Yeah, so, but just as an example, like for the getting rid of the Department of Education, right? Sounds good, right? But the deal is that if you get rid of the Department of Education, that by itself doesn't get rid of federal government education. Actually, it just gets rid of the main bureaucracy involved, right? What basically the Department of Education, all it does is oversee and administer the entitlement fundings. It does have some discretionary grant programs, and it can sort of incentivize certain pedagogy or methodology through like the regional education labs. But for the most part, it basically just administers the federal education entitlements. And the bulk of, there's at least 5 of bills that would have to be rescinded in order for getting rid of the department, getting rid of all federal education, right? So this would be the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This would be the Higher Education Act. This would be the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. It would also be the Every Student Succeeds Act, along with the Workforce Investment and Opportunities Act, which is really more of a Department of Labor thing, but it partners with the Department of Education, largely through the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education to facilitate career pathways for workforce training, right? So if we get rid of the Department of Education, most of the responses that I got online were like, he's getting rid of the department. You know, we're very upset that I wasn't like cheerleading the whole thing. And so I sort of had to do a boilerplate response over and over again, showing that, right, if you look at the Project 2025 stipulations, they say there's a reason why they call this the Department of Education Reorganization Act and not the Dismantling or Dissolving Act or Eradication Act, because they stipulate that, right? They will send back all of the Department of Education will just go to other bureaucracies. So the Office of Post-Secondary Education will go to Health and Human Services. The bulk of them will go to HHS. And then Department of Labor in second. But others would be Department of Justice, Census Bureau of the Department of Commerce, and the Department of State. So again, right, this and if you think that, you know, people will say, well, Trump didn't read Project 2025 and he doesn't like it and he's not a part of it. Okay, but like almost 30 members or people that were involved in the authorship of Project 2025 were part of his first administration, either in his cabinet or high-level executive appointments. Several of these people are currently in his administration. Some of them include Ratcliffe, head of the CIA, Vogt, head of OMB, Homan, who is the border czar, okay? And then also, if you listen to McMahon's confirmation hearing, she says as much. She says that when they ask her, well, if you get rid of the Department of Ed, well, first of all, she says, are you going to get rid of all the entitlement funding? She says, no, our goal is to fund it more efficiently. Okay. Then they asked her, what are you going to do with Individuals and Disabilities Education Act? How are you going to facilitate those entitlements? And she goes, well, I don't know if those wouldn't be better served at HHS, which is exactly what's stipulated in Project 2025. When they asked her about Title IX, how are you going to enforce Title IX provisions? And she says, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at Department of Justice, which is exactly what it says in Project 2025. And again, right, so one of the wins, one of the consolation prizes that I'm noting is, right, only two genders, right? And we're going to enforce that, right? We're going to get men out of women's sports. Well, you know how he's doing that? Well, that's by enforcing Title IX, which means you have to keep the federal entitlement in order to enforce that. So even the win you have, as far as that goes, is going to require that the federal government remain involved in education. So,
and that can be turned around as soon as the next deep state Democrat puppet is in the White House anyway. So we can go back to infinity genders with the stroke of a pen. No, this is really important stuff for people to understand. We've actually highlighted some of these bills that they don't actually end federal involvement in education. They just redistribute all the functions, like you said, to different bureaucracies. And I don't know that we're really much further ahead in that case. Really, really troubling. John, we're almost out of time here. A lot of your work is over at Unlimited Hangout. Very, very good source. Some of it's difficult reading. It's advanced stuff. It's probably not for somebody who's new to the real world, but some really good stuff there. Where else can people find your work, John, and follow you?
Schoolworldorder.info is the website that has links to all the social media. I'm Taoist Professor on X and on Telegram, same thing as well. If you want the book, that's tryingday.com. But again, the fastest way to find all those links is just go to schoolworldorder.info.
Excellent. And folks, the book is really good. School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. It's a mouthful, but it's really, really important stuff that very few people are talking about. Charlotte Iserby was talking about some of this. John has been talking about this. There's a very, very small handful of people who've not only put all the pieces together, but are publicly exposing it. So if you're interested in these subjects, highly recommend you get that. Also, go follow John Klyczek on Twitter. You can follow him at Taoist Professor. Folks, we are out of time today, but I want to thank you so much for tuning in here to Behind the Deep State for the New American. We thank you very much for all that you do for the cause of liberty. We encourage you to get over to thenewamerican.com. If you're not a subscriber yet to the print magazine, you really should be. I mean, it's just really, really solid stuff that you need. And, of course, you can follow us on all the social media platforms. And I do encourage you folks to spend some time thinking about this education issue. This is one of those issues where if we screw it up, all the other stuff is going to become irrelevant, because within a generation, maybe two, the totalitarians, the weirdos, the disciples of Barbara Marx Hubbard, they're going to ultimately succeed. I mean, a big part of this agenda runs right through the minds of your children, and that, of course, is taking place through the public school systems and even the school choice systems all around the world. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State for the New American. We appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, God bless you all.
Take back your kids' education. Freedom Project Academy is enrolling now for the fall. FPA's fully accredited classical curriculum provides live, on-demand, and homeschool courses built on Judeo-Christian values. Request your information packet by visiting freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.